Welcome once more to Little Bytham. Only this time, instead of featuring the main line, the very fast main line, East Coast main line, in this programme I'm going to be showing you the workings on the Midland section and the Midland and Great Northern section. Little Bytham was in fact an end-on junction between the two systems. Now, whereas the main line is ostensibly representative of 1958, this section, the smaller section, 12 by just over 10, really replicates or tries to the main period during British Railways days from 1948 until the line's closure at the beginning of 1959. There are one or two pre-war things as well, much more flexible. As usual, the work is that of many, many people, many friends. Sadly, I'm afraid, some now deceased. Anyway, I hope you enjoy what you see. Here we've got an overview of the complete Midland and Great Northern section of Little Bytham. Now, I must have had delusions of grandeur because in my introduction I said it was 12 foot by 10. Well, it's 12 foot, but really it's only 4.5 feet wide. But then I was never very good at maths. It means some fairly tight radii, but no matter because all the rolling stock and the locomotives negotiated. Now you'll see this train, hauled by a Millholme Ivat 4MT, later on in close-up. But here it is, circumnavigating the small part of my Little Bytham train set. I was a friend of the late Brian Lee, and Mo, my wife, and I found new homes for his collection after he had to go into a home. And it includes this K's J40 here on a goods train. I also use it on a passenger train, in this case old six-wheelers. Now it started out as a Midland 2F, but with a little bit of alteration it makes a very nice ex-LNER J40, and J40s ended their days on the M&GN section. With Bachmann's introduction of a 4F, the need to kit build examples has diminished, and here we have a modified Bachmann 4F, one with a Midland tender, on a 4-coach train from the East Midlands to King's Lynn. Now most of the rolling stock, passenger rolling stock at this time, was ex-LMS in origin, with a few LNER carriages thrown in, as can be seen here. And these carriages, the LMS ones, ex-LMS ones, are old BSL kits, and the Gresleys are a mixture of Hornby and PC. The most common passenger trains on this bit were 3 sets between Nottingham and King's Lynn return, and here's one. Now, I operate the points in the fiddle yard digitally. By that I mean my finger. And here we have a typical 3 set. Well, perhaps not quite typical because this has a couple of non-gangwayed carriages in it. The majority were gangwayed, but we can assume that the passengers here have
exceptionally large bladders. And the loco? Once I've set the point, a southeastern finecast 4F. As I say, with Bachmann's there probably isn't a need to build a 4F, but I still prefer to do so. And here it comes, over Dave Wager's magnificent girder bridge, designed by Jamie Guest. These were pretty pedestrian in their timings, stopping at all stations, and the carriages in this case are ancient BSL kits and a modified Hornby example. The signal box, an X-ratio kit, was built by me and Ian Wilson. Digital control yet again, and the train comes into its dead-end siding in the fiddle yard. Nominally I have 9 trains all made up, but such is the flexibility that I can make as many as I want because there is one through road. Another 3 set, this time made up of Lawrence Goddard carriages, and another 4F. In this case, an ancient, and I mean ancient, Acro kit. Acro from Coulsdon in Surrey made these kits shortly after the Second World War for a few years until there was an embargo on brass after the Korean War broke out and they ceased production and never ever started again. I found this kit in the bottom of a rotting box from the collection of someone who died and thought, I'll make it. So I did, and it makes up very well, considering the kit is well over 70 years old. And here it comes back again. These really are lovely coaches. Lawrence Goddard used to make them from Comet kits and BSL kits, and they're beautifully finished. Well over 70 years old and counting. Another locomotive which came from the estate of a deceased modeller, a Millholme flying pig on mixed train, typical of very early BR period. Now some of these carriages are just modified RTR and are due for replacement eventually. Not the last 2 though. We now go pre-war. Ex-Great Central D9s were used on the M&GN after their express days on the GC London Extension and so on, were finished. But they finished their days, some of them, on the M&GN and some of them on the Cheshire lines, and as a tiny child I might have seen them, but I cannot remember, but certainly not like this. It is an old McGowan kit, hauling a mixed rake of modified Hornbys and Kirk kits, all in teak. As I say, the M&GN bit is much more fluid in its time scale than the main line. B12s were common up to about 1957 on the M&GN, even going as far as Birmingham, and here's one returning on an express from Leicester to the Norfolk coast. Again the train up, mainly made up from old BSL kits. Another Millholme Flying Pig. This one didn't run very well, but I mechanically rebuilt it, and now she's fine. And the train, very typical of the early BR period, with a mixture of teak and carmine and cream stock. The Bachmann 4MT Flying Pig is a wonderful model, and here we have one on the line's principal train, the Leicester, principal enough to have a buffet car, an ex-Great Eastern RF, and this went from the Norfolk coast to Leicester on some occasions as far as Birmingham. The Wills 4F, built by Rob Kinsey, on an up freight, is held at the signal waiting for the single track section, which at the moment is occupied by a D16-3 on a typical 3-seat XLMS carriages in carmine and cream. The wonderful signals on this section were built by Mick Nicholson and Tony G, so thanks to those. And once the line, the single track section to Saxby, is clear, the 4F gets the road, gets the lower quadrant peg, and crawls away. And its train, a mixture of kit builds and modified proprietary, typical of the period, early BR days, some of the stock still in Big 4 branding or even private owned. Mostly weathered by me, some by Rob Davey. A Millholme 2P on yet another typical 3-set, King's Lynn to Nottingham. And this train, this set, is made up from one Larry Goddard carriage, the leading one, and 2 ancient BSLs. These came to me in somewhat parlour state, the 2 carmine and cream ones, with no bogies, so I built bogies for them and tidied them up. I don't know who built them, but they're getting on, several years old now. And up goods on the main line and the 2P crossing over. A nice juxtaposition. A London Road Models D3, a lovely kit. I built it and Jeff Haynes painted it. It's leaving the fiddle yard. And it's the same 3-set you saw earlier with the 2 non-gangway coaches. As I say, gangway coaches were more typical, but at peak times almost anything that could turn a wheel would appear to have been utilised. At stately pace. Nothing really went fast on the M&GN. A lovely bridge, which still stands, was built by Bob Dawson. And it goes back to its respective road in Fiddle Yard. No DCC control, so simple on-off switches. An ancient K's J3, a budget model, which appeared in BRM earlier this year, bought for very little and made to go, but not with K's mechanics. So I built this and painted it, and Jeff Haynes weathered it for me. And again, the goods train and up goods, a typical mixture. Some kit some modified RTR. Another locomotive from Brian Lee's collection, the late Brian Lee now. A scratch-built ex-Midland 3P. These were well liked on this line. It's got a Zenith motor showing its age, and it's a bit noisy. But not as noisy as this. Who built it, I don't know, but it's got a porter's cab, presumably a newer porter's cab, and it doesn't half whine. And the carriages, a lovely 3-set. Lawrence Goddard. Another model by a deceased builder, the late great Dave Shakespeare. A modified Bachmann Flying Pig. It's really nice to have locomotives and carriages which were once the property of late friends. Not nice because they've died now, but as a memento of dear friends. And they're being used and they're cherished. This loco has an interesting story. It's a WSM D2. It was bought by a friend of mine in Australia, and when he received it from the UK, it was a kit again. It had been glued together. So I rebuilt it, and it's now living in Australia. Its train is a mixture of Pattons and Hornby 6-wheelers, plus a couple of Kirk non-gangway cars to finish off.